On Sunday the 6th of March 2011, the Plumbridge community welcomed to their village the families of the 5 men who had been on board an Averlanson LV-153. The aircraft which crashed into Mullacloughlin Mountain by Legnagopic Glen on the 6th of March 1945, 66 years earlier to the day. Local people had until recently known little of the men on board that evening, or indeed of the circumstances of what happened at that time. We had come to learn that the crew members, 4 of whom had lost their lives here, were from places far removed from our beautiful rural place here in the Sperrins. They were from Ontario, Canada, Bondi, New South Wales, Australia, and from places in England. Their families had travelled considerable distances to join Glenelly Historical Society in what was a poignant commemoration of an event that had gone largely unmarked before then. They were keen to view the actual site of the crash and close by the place where Glenelly Historical Society had erected a memorial. Local people from townlands local to the crash provided transport. The relatives and friends entered the spirit of the day and had an opportunity to experience something of the climate and the terrain of an early spring morning as it would have been in March 1945. In hosting the event, the Society sought to remember the loss of precious young lives. It was felt important that the assistance and hospitality of people living close to Legnagopic Glen in 1945 should be acknowledged too. Many of these people are no longer with us, yet their willingness to help, their kindness, their compassion and their gentle natures live on in the memories of those to whom it mattered. Society member Alan McFarland detailed what we know of the circumstances of the crash. Much of the information we held had been provided by the Ulster Aviation Society. Other aspects had been sourced from detail given by the Shaxton family, yet more from the National Archives Australia. We had collectively pieced together what we knew in order to get some sense of just what had happened.
The Western Isles are up here, and they would have flown up, hopefully to Tiree, and come down to hit Rathlin Island, which is off Northern Ireland here. Now, somehow they got off bearing, and it's an easy thing to do, because all you need is a small degree when you start off, but if you're going in the wrong direction, by the time you've travelled 50 or 100 miles, you are fairly far off course. And it looks as if they missed Rathlin. They then were flying down here. I'll just orientate you. This is Derry, Londonderry, almost down here, and these are the Sperrin Mountains here, and this marks the crash site here, this at the end of this arrow. So they got themselves on a wrong bearing down here, got lost. And they then decided, I suspect, to do a turnaround and to try and do a back bearing heading back roughly the way they came, and they then decided they would come down low to see if they could see the ground and pick up some markers, because they thought that they were still over the sea, as we understand it. Whatever happened, they came in from the west-southwest here and ended up hitting the mountain just up here, and I'll cover that in a second. This is a map of the Sperrin Mountains, and you can see marked here, the left-hand one here is where you are standing at the moment, on a little ridge between 2 re-entrants here, one on either side, and up here, some 800 or 900 metres away, up there, you will see a red marker. The red marker is just below the skyline, on a line just over Duncan with the hat here, and if you've got binoculars you can see it, you can just make it out. This is a very beautiful place here on a nice bright summer's day. We had worry this morning that the cloud would be down completely and you couldn't see anything, but you can actually sort of see the marker there. This is quite a much higher mountain behind here, and another higher one behind here still. So this is a great big sort of bowl here. So coming in, depending on which line they were on, if they were coming flat in over that ridge here and crashed up here, if they had missed this ridge, they would almost certainly have got the larger mountain. If on the other hand they were coming up the valley here, which I suspect they probably were, they clipped just near the top, and if they'd made it over the top, that particular thing goes left of the main mountain here. Now, whether they would have hit mountains further on or not is a different issue, because there are other mountains in Sperrins further on. I just want, sorry, 2 seconds, hold that for a second. I just want to read you a couple of things here. This is a letter that was sent by the station commander at Wigtown to one of the relatives describing what happened. It said, an Anson aircraft took off at 9:30 p.m. for a night navigation exercise to the northwest of here. The aircraft should have returned from Tiree via Rathlin, but crashed into the Sperrin Mountains at about midnight. And the actual crash report says there were no technical failures discovered. Airframe and engines completely wrecked. Both engines appear to be running under normal power when the aircraft crashed. An examination of the gyroscopic instruments in conjunction with the electrical office at the Royal Naval Air Station Maydown, which is just outside Londonderry, revealed that they were rotating at high speed prior to the crash. Now, just very briefly, what happened, as we understand it, and again you'll hear it later on, is that there was a survivor, Jackson's husband, who had carried out the procedure, and that is to make yourself visible, because it is like the normal aircraft recovery thing is they fly aircraft over where they think the last position would be, and they try to see you on the ground. And one of the markers that the pilots told to do was to get their dinghies out, because if they were in the sea, they were in their dinghies. So he got his dinghy out and sat in his dinghy, which is a great big bright orange thing. So he was found eventually because there were 2 workmen. My grandfather owned this part of the mountain up here, which he doesn't any longer because he's dead, and it was sold some time back. And the 2 workmen who were up digging drains here, as we understand it, kept hearing noises, funny noises during the day. And eventually, towards the late afternoon, they went to investigate. And I suspect the prevailing wind here is normally southwest, so any wind would have carried noise back over that ridge, and they would have been down here somewhere. So they went to investigate the noise, and they found Mr. Sergeant Saxton, sitting in his dinghy, surrounded by curious sheep, as we understand, I think, and you've been back here.
Yes, he thought he was in Scotland.
Yeah, yeah, and blowing his whistle, because of course the national emergency signal is 6 blasts, for those of you who are mountaineers who know this well, 6 blasts on a whistle, and he'd been blowing his whistle all day. They eventually, I think, took him down to a cottage that you passed on the way up. It's over that ridge there, and I think probably we'll stop on the way down to let you have a quick look at it. And eventually, obviously, help was summoned, and the bodies were recovered. Clearly, a lot of the technical equipment was taken away for examination. I think some local people decided they wouldn't mind a wheel or 2 for their trailer, so I think bits and pieces disappeared over the over the Sunday. In fact, I think Rose will tell you, eyewitnesses talk about people locally coming up here and children climbing on the airframes, I think a few days afterwards, because obviously the bits were left here still. Obviously those who had died were recovered down to beside the cottage, and again you'll probably hear more about that later today. Eventually my grandfather was asked to bury the aircraft, and up on top of the mountain there, and we've tried to find it and we can't at the moment, the workmen dug a big hole and put what remained of the aircraft in it, and it's obviously just sort of metal and bits and pieces. So somewhere up there's a big hole with the bits of the aircraft in it, and I don't know what the next project is to see if we can find that or something. Anyway, so that's where we are. A quick look, you can see, anyone can't see the marker. It's straight, it's red. Everyone can see all right where we're talking about. What we'll do now is to go back down to the monument, which has been built, and Rosemary will explain the ins and outs of all of that. And when that's finished, those who are going back to Plumbridge will go back to Plumbridge, and those who wish to feel they want to brave the mountain will take them up, and you can actually sort of stand up there.
The actual crash site was some 900 metres above where Glenelly Historical Society had erected a memorial to the men. Several people chose to climb to the location. Others were happy to return to the village. But first the Society paid tribute to the men who had been on board. A memorial built by the hillside was unveiled. Rosemary Murphy, Secretary of Glenelly Historical Society, spoke of how it was the commemoration came about and the relevance it has to local people living here today. 17-year-old Niall Murphy and 18-year-old Rachel McKelvey read poems and reflections. There was an appreciation that some of the men who had died were only just a few years older.
So I suppose there was always an interest in the local community about this crash, particularly among the older people. And there was talk about it, bits and pieces, and there was confusion maybe about other crashes that had happened. Altogether, there were 11 crashes that happened in the Sperrins during World War II, 5 local to Plumbridge. And I suppose what was unique about this one was that the fact that there was a survivor, and maybe that's why we knew more about it, because people had talked about the impact that Michael had made whenever he came back in 1982, and the interaction he had with local farmers at the time. And it was decided then that we would have a wee investigation, and on the 1st of August then in last year, about 40 people came up here to visit the site. And I suppose local farmers and landowners or whatever as well got interested as well. And we realised that day that the men, there were more than just names. There were actually people who, young men who died, and they weren't just necessarily from, whilst we'd seen their bodies, if you like, in the local community, they didn't really know anything about them. And I suppose because we consider ourselves quite a friendly people, we wanted to know something about them, and we felt that they hadn't been done, or we even hadn't been done justice and our friendship, if you like. So we discovered then that 4 men had died. There was Richard Button from Sheffield, he was 19. Robert Gillen, 27, he was from Bondi, New South Wales. Ian McFadden, 21, from Port Arthur, Ontario. And Jack Pennock, 24, from Southend-on-Sea. And we're just going to have Rachel now and Niall read something here.
An Irish airman foresees his death. I know that I shall meet my fate somewhere among the clouds above. Those I fight I do not hate, those I guard I do not love. Nor law nor duty bade me fight, nor public men nor cheering crowds. A lonely impulse of delight drove to this tumult in the clouds. Adapted W.B. Yeats. From Bondi, from Thunder Bay, from Southend-on-Sea, Australian, Canadian, English, young men at the very threshold of life. What might they have achieved in another 60 years? Had they lived a couple of months longer, they would have survived the war to be welcomed back to their families, to return home with stories to stir the blood. Would they have been heroes if shot down over Berlin, or lost in a dogfight over the cliffs of Dover? They were doing what they felt they wished to do. We need such unsung heroes, more like ourselves.
A Herbo by Seamus Heenan. Everywhere plants flourish among graves, sinking their roots in all the dynasties of the dead. We had enemies, though why we never knew. Among them nettles, malignant things, letting on to be asleep. Enemies, part of a world nobody seemed to be able to explain. But that had to be put up with. There would always be dock leaves to cure vicious things. From Bondi and Thunder Bay to Digna Gobbet, the hollow of the dock or dockins, as we call them hereabouts, as they do ease the sting, whichever we call them. As Andy Griffin and Andy Duffy, the Dennehy family and Pat Devine, whose resourcefulness eased the sting of war and brought healing to the living and reservedness of the dead. As did the people of the Glen, who stood in silent sympathy with young men who died in a lonely place on a foggy night so far from home.
Catherine's going to play a tune on the fiddle here, Tamsi Amahulu, which when translated means I am sleeping.
This was erected about a week ago here by Michael and William, our chairman. So they did a good job.
I'm completely overcome. Mike would have been so delighted that something like this had been put up. He always felt almost guilty that he was the one who survived, and one does wonder why. From my point of view, of course, my life would have been completely different. I didn't know Michael when he was in the Air Force, and so I'm sorry, I'm finding very...
That's fine, Dwayne.
Ensuring that folk were aptly dressed and shod to deal with the weather and terrain, Alan led relatives and friends to the crash site. The main commemorative event was held in the parochial hall in the afternoon. The setting was enhanced by Philip Faithfull's impressive display of World War II memorabilia. Bridge McLean, coordinator of the Austro-American Folk Park's Live and Learn project, had on display a magnificent collection of material artefacts relating to the 1940s.
They're out where they're setting up, you know, taking a bit of time to set up and
different people have different walks and you get to know the walk of people. So if you get to at all, you sort of knew by the outline of their bodies who they were.
Over 200 people gathered to be at the commemoration that day. The audience comprised relatives, friends and local people. The families of those individuals who played their part in assisting at the time were represented. It was a poignant bringing together of people who had an interest in what had happened. It was the first opportunity the majority had to hear the story, one that drew on an entire spectrum of culture and age, one that told of the sad loss of young people just like our own, and one that told of the wonderful generosity and compassion demonstrated by good, kind people.
Right, we're going to have Dervla here to sing a wee song first.
Shall the rose in moed yet, shall nation voin traga datre, mohewai traun a dam godren, jivar naganyags enemy gain, shemuliach moyil emar, shemo hazer gilamar, so na sheni voides ein, Oluch igain mogelamar. Bim shibon borch gaglo, ekigo cruis ector nan yor, mars gwil gum an bokel bio, snarry of terrors ore shui mo brum. Shemuliach mo yilamar, shemo hazer yilamar, so na sheni voides ein, oluch igain mogelamar. Ni lauran gogos rorgar nion, is nil go gaider igwil togro, na madin haru iglante pio, o de meitrio I mo vogel bio. Shemoliach mo yilemar, shemo hazer yilemar, so na sheni voides ein, oluch igain mogelamar. Marka gois aloi bragoig, gasgan gron gosor gar sno, glagis lan lo en lo, ik tiasgan tros ik trorgin troin. Shemoliach mo yilemar, shemo hazer yilemar, so na sheni voides ein, oluch igain mogelamar. Hug shinter star ar flashig yol, is linter tointer carter mord, le hinge nord gan hio, until is linter dal dun lon. Yilemar, so shall we grow, is agul we glow do, so na sheni voides ein, oluch igain mogelamar, shemoliach mo yilemar, shemo hazer gilamar, so na sheni voides ein, oluch igain mogelamar.
Good evening, everybody here, and welcome here to the Parish Hall in Blunbridge. There, you're all very, very welcome. Rosemary carried out a considerable amount of research, and as a result, we compiled a short film which sort of gives an insight into the this historic event. So we're going to have that short film shown here now.
Late on a March evening in 1945, an Avril Lansing LV-153 of the Royal Navy's Air Force Advanced Flying Unit left Wigtown on the west coast of Scotland. It had 5 men on board. Men from Ontario, Canada, New South Wales, Australia, and from Southend-on-Sea, Sheffield, and from Midhurst in Sussex. They were in a night training flight. Their instruction was to depart Wigtown, abeam Rathlin Island and travel to Blackpool before making a return home to Wigtown. The weather conditions were not ideal for flying, but it was early March and February had seen quite high levels of rain. It was a foggy night, but these men were just about to go on operations, and so the training exercise by night was deemed necessary. They had not left Wigtown long when it was apparent that they were in difficulties. Completely disorientated, the navigator had no idea where they might be. The pilot felt that they might be flying over the sea and so lowered his height to have a look. Perhaps they might recognise something. They were travelling at what was termed good speed when it was that their aircraft hit the northwest slopes of Mullaclocha in the Sperrins. An accident report done by the electrical officer at the Royal Navy Air Station Maydown at that time tells us that the plane broke in two. The aircraft's frame and engines were completely destroyed. 4 men lay dead. At least one of the men had been thrown clear of the wreckage. They lay wounded in the heather-clad slopes of Legnacopic Glen. The mountain is a distant place, seldom trodden except by the occasional soul. The chance of the discovery of these men was just as remote as the place. By daylight, 2 local men went to work on the east of Mullaclocha. It was Tuesday. Andy Duffy and Andy Griffin were friends and often worked together. They were to spend the day clearing drains, or what locally we would term clearing shoughs. They might have been doing a bit of fencing too. Throughout the day they heard the occasional sound of a whistle, but ignored it for a time. They were busy in their work. It was 4:30 and they were ready to make their way home. They decided to follow the sound of the now persistent whistling. They found the only survivor of the aircraft crash, 23-year-old Flight Sergeant Michael Shaxton, by the wreckage of the aircraft. He had sustained multiple injuries, but nonetheless had managed to make his way into the aircraft's inflatable dinghy. Surrounded by a heathered landscape and spotting the occasional black-faced sheep, Michael had no reason to believe that he had left Scotland. Mary Donaghy was a young girl living in the area at that time. She'd been in her bed the previous evening when she'd heard the roar of an aircraft above the family's isolated cottage in Carricane. It was commonplace to hear the sound of aircraft overhead. The Sperrin Mountains were used extensively as a training place. But this was different. Her father Patrick was retiring for the night and commented on just how low the plane had been flying. It was around tea time the following day that a frantic knock came to their door. Friend and neighbour Andy Duffy looked distraught. Local man Andy Griffin was with him. There's been a terrible crash up in the mountain and there's a lot of men dead. But there's still one man alive We need to get him down. Having carried Michael for a bit, they used a slipe, a low level piece of apparatus drawn by a horse, to bring Michael down the mountain to the Donaghy home. Mary was a woman of the house that day. Her mother was not at home, and so, together with her young sister, she took control. She wrapped blankets around the man, and she recalls how he appeared to fall asleep a lot. He struggled to communicate with them, but indicated that he wanted a drink of water. Meanwhile, Andy Griffin had gone to seek help in a nearby farmhouse. Young Pat Devine made his way, probably by horseback, some 2 miles away, to Stranagalloway Post Office. The emergency services were called. Back in the cottage, Mary was making tea for her visitor. She remembers how he shook his head when he had had enough. They waited a few hours before a policeman and later an ambulance arrived. Michael's shattered legs were splinted, and Mary and her family wished him well as he was taken off to Derry's Naval Hospital. People from the townland gathered around. Many older people held vivid, daunting memories of seeing the bodies of 4 young men being coffined along the roadside. Mary recalls her father insisting that she remain in the cottage. Years later, he was to speak of the young men having been brought down from the glen, wrapped in their parachutes. Mary left Ireland as a young woman. She settled in England and values the memories she holds of that day. It will be no surprise to learn that she chose nursing as a profession. And the next few weeks, the men who'd lost their lives here were buried in graves in Yorkshire, Southend-on-Sea, St Mary's Roman Catholic Church, Limavady, and Tamlach Finlagan Church of Ireland, Ballykelly, County Derry. Sergeant Richard Arthur Button was the youngest of the men on board that evening. He was just 19. His family home was in Deepcar, Yorkshire. He was the eldest of Horace and Blanche Button's 6 sons. He had 2 sisters. Richard was a popular pianist. He played in a band, 7 to 11 Hellcats. Typically, they practiced in the local parish hall or sometimes even in Richard's own home. His father had died in 1940, and so it was his mother Blanche who received the news of Richard's death in a telegram from RAF Wigtown. He left behind his girlfriend Hilda. Richard was buried in St Mary's Churchyard, Bollerstone, Yorkshire. Flying Officer Ian McFadden was the pilot. Aged 21 years, he was in Port Arthur, Ontario, Canada. His image hung in his former school Hillcrest High, where he graduated in 1943. Ian's mother had died in 1941. His father, Alexander, had another son, Hector. Ian had 2 sisters, Isabel and Joan. His ancestors had emigrated to Canada from Scotland, and he still has a number of relatives living there. Ian is buried in Tamlach Finlagan Churchyard in County Derry. On the 3rd of August that same year, someone called Aunt Anne placed an additional marble tablet beside Ian's headstone. Flight Sergeant Robert Hugh Gillen was the flight navigator. Bob, as he was known, was in the Royal Australian Air Force. He had left school aged 16 years and enlisted on the 17th of June 1941. He left for England on May 1944. In Manchester that September, he was godfather to his cousin's baby, James Luke. Bob had been a keen sportsman, having played rugby for the eastern suburbs of Sydney. He enjoyed swimming and athletics. He was 27 when he died. His father Alexander, who'd emigrated from Ballycastle, had died sometime earlier, and the news of Bob's death was received by his mother Eleanor Grace and his 9 siblings in Bondi, New South Wales, a few days later. He was buried in St Mary's, Limavady at 10:30 on March 10th. Amongst the items handed over to his mother a few months later were his rosary beads. Warrant Officer Jack Pennock was 24 when he died. He had married his wife Lesbia in Lancashire in 1940. When Jack died, he had a 4-month-old daughter. At birth, the little girl had been registered Daphne Patricia Pennock. Her father called her Pat. 5 days after Jack's death, his daughter was christened Jacqueline Daphne. Jackie, as she is known to her friends, grew up knowing little of the circumstances of her father's death. She knew that he died somewhere in Ireland. She was not sure that he was in the grave that she visited regularly. Her mother had remarried and never spoke of Jack. Jack was buried in that grave in Southend-on-Sea. His daughter cannot be with us today, but she's asked that we read a message she's written. It's addressed to her father. I wish I could have had some memories of you, but you were taken from me so very soon. I wish I'd asked Mum for more of her memories of you, but I didn't want to upset her. So many wishes, which I hope maybe will be granted someday. May you rest safely in God's keeping until we meet. Your loving daughter, Pat. Michael Shaxson, the survivor, spent some time in hospital in Northern Ireland before returning with his family to England. He married his wife Doreen in 1948. They had 2 children, Andrew and Joanna. Michael had for a long number of years a desire to come back to meet the 2 men who'd rescued him. And local people were privileged to meet with him and his lovely wife Doreen in 1982. This was made possible with the support of Ernie Cromie, Ulster Aviation Society and the Northern Ireland Tourist Board. Michael passed away on the 6th of January 1996. Between heather and marigold, between sphagnum and buttercup, between dandelion and broom, between forget-me-not and honeysuckle. The poet Seamus Heaney was born in Balahy, County Derry, just a few parishes over the mountain from Legnagopic. He would know that Legnagopic means hollow of the docks, or dockins as we call them. Reared rurally, he would have known that we apply the dockin leaf to relieve the pain when by chance we are stung by the nettle. He wrote of them, "We had enemies, though why we never knew. Among them nettles, malignant things, letting on to be asleep. Enemies, part of a world nobody seemed able to put up with. There would always be dock leaves to cure the vicious stings. We trust that Jack, Bob, Ian, Richard and Michael will in some way smile down on us today. They weren't to know that when they set out on that March evening, 66 years ago to the day, that they would have made a landing that would be thought worthy of commemoration. We trust that in marking the infliction of pain and the passing of lives on a dark spring night in 1945 and the glen of Legnacopa, we might allow our friendship to ease the lingering sting that is war.
The other person that was involved in that film there was Ernie Cromie, together with himself and Gary Pentland and Dennis Burke. They did a lot of research into that particular crash and other ones within the area. So maybe Ernie would want to say a few words here now, just at this moment.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, for the opportunity just to say a few words. I want to begin, if I may, just by quickly thanking, in particular, Rosemary Murphy and the Glenelly Historical Society for the invitation to be here today. Could I also begin just by quickly conveying to you, on behalf of my wife Lucy, an apology. She had hoped to be here, but due to a certain amount of illness in the family, I'm afraid that wasn't possible. I'd also like, I've been asked particularly by Diane Harron, whose voice you heard in the BBC documentary. Diane would have loved also to have been here today. She's living now in retirement in County Down, but she has spent the past week in Morocco, lucky lady,
And just, although she was due back last night, felt that really it wouldn't have been easy for her to be here today. So that's what I just wanted to begin by recording those apologies. I first came to this area 29 years ago. Well, actually, I had been in the area earlier than that, but I first came on a specific purpose 29 years ago, armed with as much information as I was able to gather from the Air Historical Branch of the Ministry of Defence about the crash, where it had occurred, where the aircraft had been flying from, and so on, in order to establish just exactly where the aircraft had crashed. From the moment I set foot in the locality, the thing that immediately struck me was the friendliness and the help